At my husband's funeral, no one came but me. Our children, our flesh and blood, chose parties, friends, and excuses over saying goodbye to their father. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. The chapel smelled faintly of lilies and old wood polish. Rows of empty pews stared back at me like hollow eyes. The pastor's voice echoed softly through the space, reading words of comfort meant for a crowd that never came. I sat alone, hands shaking as I clutched the folded handkerchief Tom used to carry in his jacket pocket. He would have smiled at me then, gentle as always, and said, "Don't cry, Evie. I'm right here." But he wasn't. Only silence answered me now. When I called our son, Grant, the night before, he didn't even let me finish my sentence. His tone was flat. "Mom, I can't cancel the trip again. It's just a funeral. We already said our goodbyes." He said just a funeral, as if burying his father were no more important than skipping a lunch meeting. Our daughter, Marla, didn't answer at all. Her last text said, "Sorry, Mom. I'll light a candle or something. Busy weekend." Busy. That word burned more than any insult could. The pastor closed his Bible, giving me a kind smile that only made the emptiness worse. When the hymn began, my voice was the only one singing. It trembled, cracking halfway through, and I let the music fade into quiet sobs. The echo filled the chapel, just me, my grief, and the sound of my own heart breaking. I stayed until everyone left. The workers came to close the casket, and I touched Tom's cold hand one last time. His ring still shone faintly in the dim light. "You deserved better," I whispered. We both did. Outside, the sky was heavy with rain clouds. I stood under the gray light, watching the hearse roll away. There should have been family following behind, cars lined up, flowers, voices. Instead, there was only me. Back home, I made tea I didn't drink. The house was too quiet. Tom's slippers were still by the fireplace, his glasses still on the table beside the recliner. I couldn't bring myself to move them. When night came, I sat at his desk and pulled out the old folder marked Willand Estate. My hands trembled as I opened it. There were their names, Grant and Marla, neatly written in black ink, just the way Tom and I had planned years ago. We thought we were leaving a legacy. Instead, we'd raised strangers who couldn't care less. The rain began tapping against the window as I picked up a pen. For a long moment, I stared at the page, the names blurring through my tears. Then slowly, I drew one firm line through each of them. Something inside me went still. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sorrow anymore. It was peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for people to love you back. The old photo album lay open on the kitchen table, pages curling at the edges. Evelyn's fingers traced a picture of her and Tom at 17, his arm around her, both of them grinning in front of an old red pickup. She could still remember the smell of motor oil and summer grass, the sound of Tom's laugh echoing through the open fields behind their high school. Back then, life felt like a promise. They married young, against everyone's advice. Tom worked at the lumber yard while Evelyn took shifts at the diner. Together they saved every dollar they could, dreaming of a small home with a garden, a place to raise the family they always talked about. When Grant was born, Tom built the crib himself. When Marla came along, he painted her room yellow because Evelyn said it felt like sunshine. Those were the years when love felt easy, before ambition, before pride, before the kids started wanting more than what two small-town parents could give. Evelyn and Tom pushed themselves harder, picking up extra work so their children could have what they never did. Better schools, new clothes, dance lessons, summer camps. Each time the bills piled up, Tom would just smile and say, "We'll figure it out. They deserve it." And they did figure it out somehow. But somewhere between college applications and graduation ceremony, Evelyn began noticing the shift. Grant stopped calling home unless he needed something. Marla's visits grew shorter, her hugs quick and distracted. The warmth in the house dimmed, replaced by polite conversations and quick exits. Tom always tried to smooth things over. "They're just busy," he'd say, brushing her worry aside. That's how kids are at this age. Evelyn wanted to believe him. She told herself they'd grow out of it. That gratitude came later, when people finally saw what they'd been given. But it never did. When Grant got his first job, he complained about the car they helped him buy, saying it wasn't new enough. Marla asked for help with her apartment deposit, promising to pay them back, but she never did. Tom would laugh it off, saying, "They'll learn responsibility when they have kids of their own." Evelyn nodded, pretending to agree, even though something cold had started settling in her chest. The last family dinner she remembered clearly was a Thanksgiving night 5 years ago. The table was full, but no one seemed present. Grant scrolled through his phone between bites. Marla complained about her boss, her tone sharp, ungrateful. Tom tried to keep conversation alive, asking about their plans, but they barely looked up. When Evelyn set down the pumpkin pie she'd baked from scratch, no one even thanked her. Later that night, when she washed the dishes alone, Tom came up behind her, kissed her shoulder, and said softly, "They love you, you know." She nodded, though she no longer believed it. Love didn't feel like silence. It didn't feel like taking without giving back. That was the night Evelyn stopped pretending they were a perfect family. It was also the night she first understood that love, once taken for granted, never truly returns the same way. The steady hum of machines filled the hospital room. The pale light from the window stretched across the floor, landing on Tom's frail hands resting on the blanket. His breathing was slow, but his eyes were awake, sharp in a way that made Evelyn's heart ache. She sat beside him, holding onto the hand that once felt strong enough to build anything. He turned his head toward her, his voice rough but certain. "Evie," he whispered, "promise me something." She leaned closer, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Anything." His lips curved into a tired smile. "Promise me you'll make them remember who raised them." The words cut deeper than she expected. She wanted to tell him not to worry, that Grant and Marla loved him, that they'd come soon. But she couldn't bring herself to lie. He already knew the truth. "They won't come," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "They've already said their goodbyes. That's what they think this is. Some chapter they can close when it's inconvenient." Evelyn's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but he was right. She'd seen the same indifference, the same distance he had. Still, hearing him say it aloud made her chest feel hollow. He reached for her hand, his grip weak but steady. "You did your best," he murmured. "You gave them everything. Don't carry their choices like they're your fault." Tears blurred her vision. "I should have done more," she said softly. "I should have made them see what they had." Tom's fingers brushed hers, his touch barely there. "You loved them enough for both of us. That was all you could do." The room fell quiet except for the rhythmic beeping. She listened to his breathing, memorizing the sound. Every shallow inhale felt like sand slipping through her fingers. When the nurse came to check his Evelyn stepped aside, watching the gentle care with which they adjusted the tubes. Tom closed his eyes for a moment, and she thought he had fallen asleep. But then he spoke again, voice faint but firm. "They'll learn, Evie. Maybe not now, maybe not how we hoped, but they'll remember." She pressed her forehead against his hand. "I promise," she whispered. Later that night, after the room went still, she sat beside him long after his heartbeat faded from the monitor. The nurse quietly covered him, murmuring condolences she barely heard. Evelyn didn't cry right away. She just stared at his face, peaceful at last, and felt the weight of his words settle inside her like stone. When she finally left the hospital, dawn was breaking. The sky was pale gray, the air cold and still. She walked to the car without looking back, her promise echoing in her mind. At home, she lit the lamp in the living room, the same one Tom had fixed a dozen times. The glow felt fragile. She placed his wedding band beside her own on the table and sat in silence, her heart steady with resolve. She would keep her word. One way or another, she would make them remember. The knock came late in the afternoon, sharp and quick. Evelyn opened the door to see Grant standing there, his hands in his jacket pockets, sunglasses still on though the day was dim. Behind him, Marla leaned against her car, scrolling through her phone. "Hey, Mom," Grant said, stepping past her before she could answer. "Didn't think you'd still be here. Thought you might have gone to Aunt Helen's or something." Evelyn didn't reply. She watched as he dropped his keys on the table, his eyes scanning the living room as if he were appraising it. A moment later, Marla came in, her perfume heavy, her smile tight. "We figured we should check on you," Marla said. "It's been what, a few days?" "Yes," Evelyn said softly. "A few days." They sat down at the kitchen table, where Tom's mug still rested near the sink. The air felt strange, too quiet, too clean. Grant leaned back in his chair, glancing toward the back door that led to Tom's old workshop. "So, what are you planning to do with Dad's tools?" he asked, casual but impatient. "Some of that stuff's worth real money. I could take a look, help you sell it." Evelyn met his eyes. "Your father built those with his hands. They're not for sale." Grant shrugged, as if she'd said something naive. "It's just stuff, Mom." Marla jumped in, smoothing her hair. "He's just saying it doesn't make sense to keep all this clutter. You've got more house than you need now. We can help you downsize." Evelyn poured coffee into 3 cups, the sound of the liquid filling the silence. She set theirs in front of them, then took her seat without touching her own. "You came all this way," she said. "And that's what you want to talk about?" Marla looked away, pretending not to hear the edge in her voice. "We just thought it'd be easier if we got things in order sooner." Evelyn studied them carefully, the curve of Grant's smirk, the impatience flickering behind Marla's polite tone. Their faces looked familiar but hollow, like photos left too long in the sun. Tom's death hadn't softened them. It had only made them restless. Grant drummed his fingers on the table. "I mean, you've got the will and all that, right? Maybe we could go over it, just so there aren't any surprises later." Evelyn smiled faintly. "There won't be." He didn't catch the weight in her words. Marla checked her phone again, muttering something about being late. They stood, leaving half their coffee untouched. Grant gave a quick nod. Marla leaned in for a kiss on the cheek but stopped halfway, her purse already swinging over her shoulder. The door closed with a soft click. The silence that followed felt heavier than the day of the funeral. Evelyn stayed at the table, staring at the 2 untouched cups, steam fading into the air. For a long time, she didn't move. The quiet seemed to grow, filling every corner of the house, pressing against her chest. When the last trace of warmth left the room, she whispered to no one. They didn't come for him. They came for what he left. Dust hung in the air as Evelyn pushed open the door to Tom's study. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper, the scent that had always reminded her of winter evenings when he'd sit here working. Sunlight cut through the blinds in thin stripes, falling across the desk still cluttered with pens, receipts, and half-read books. She hadn't stepped inside since the day he passed. Now, with slow hands, she began sorting through the drawers, unsure what she was looking for. There were envelopes marked with years, a few faded photographs, and a stack of notebooks tied with string. She sat in his old chair, the wood creaking beneath her, and opened the first one. Inside were neat lines of Tom's handwriting, dates, amounts, and short notes beside each entry. Grant, college tuition, 2nd semester. Marla, apartment deposit. Grant, car repair, said he'll pay next month. Page after page told the same story. Money sent, promises broken, silence afterward. Her throat tightened as she flipped through the ledger. He had written it all down, every check, every favor, every unreturned call. It wasn't bitterness she saw in his words. It was sorrow carefully recorded, a quiet confession left behind. In the margin of one page, a single line stood out, underlined twice in his firm handwriting. We taught them everything but gratitude. Evelyn froze. The words felt heavy, as if they'd been waiting for her all this time. She could almost hear his voice saying them, calm but disappointed. He had seen their selfishness long before she could admit it. She turned to another notebook. It wasn't about money, just thoughts he'd scribbled late at night. Some pages spoke of pride in his children, others of worry that they'd forgotten what love looked like. One note simply read, Evie doesn't see it yet. She still believes they'll come around. A slow ache spread through her chest. She closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the desk. For years she defended them, made excuses, softened every blow. She had believed that love could blind time itself. But Tom had known better. He'd written the truth quietly, without anger, as if he understood that someday she would need to see it for herself. Evelyn leaned back in his chair. The notebooks spread before her like a map of their life together. Every sacrifice, every disappointment, every unanswered act of care. For a long while she didn't move. The light shifted across the room, turning gold as evening crept in. The clock ticked steadily on the wall, the same one Tom used to wind every Sunday. Finally, she gathered the notebooks, stacking them neatly. The decision formed in her mind with startling clarity. It wasn't enough to cross out names. That was only the surface. She would start again, not as the woman who begged for affection, but as someone who understood what was owed and what was lost. As she closed the drawer for the last time, the room seemed to exhale. The air felt lighter, her purpose sharp and sure. Tom had left her the truth. Now she would decide what to do with it. The next morning, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee, staring at the number written on a scrap of paper. It was Mr. Clayton's office line, Tom's old friend, and the man who had handled their affairs for decades. Her fingers hovered over the phone for a moment before she finally dialed. He answered with his usual calm tone. Mrs. Hart, it's been a while. How are you holding up? I'm fine, she said evenly. I need to make a few changes to my will. There was a pause on the other end. Of course. Do you want to schedule an appointment? I'd rather handle it today, she replied. I've made my decision. An hour later, she sat across from him in his office, the faint hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence. Mr. Clayton looked older than she remembered, his glasses sliding down his nose as he pulled up the file. It's still listed as joint property between you and Tom, he said, scanning the papers. The beneficiaries remain Grant and Marla. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. Remove them. He glanced up. I beg your pardon? Take their names off. All of it, house, accounts, everything. I want it transferred to Dean. Mr. Clayton blinked, uncertain. Tom's nephew? The one who helped with his treatments. Yes, she said. He was there when it mattered. He gave time, not excuses. The lawyer hesitated. That's quite a step, Evelyn. Are you sure this is what you want? These things can't easily be undone. Her voice stayed steady. They buried their father long before I did. I'm only setting things right. He studied her face, searching for emotion, but found none. After a quiet sigh, he nodded. Very well. I'll prepare the new documents. You'll need to sign once they're ready. As he printed the forms, Evelyn looked around the office, the same space where she and Tom had once sat side by side, planning a future they believed was built on family. She remembered how proud Tom had been, saying, At least the kids will have something solid when we're gone. The memory no longer warmed her, it chilled her instead. When the papers were ready, she took the pen Mr. Clayton offered and signed her name in calm, deliberate strokes. Her signature looked different somehow, firmer, clearer. He slid the folder toward her when it was done. Everything's official now. Thank you, she said, rising to leave. Back home, the evening light spilled through the living room window. She placed the updated will on the desk beside Tom's old ledger, the ink still drying. Pulling open the drawer, she found the original copy, the one with her children's names written neatly across the page. She took out a pen and drew one slow line through each of them. The sound of the ink scratching the paper was soft but final. When she set the pen down, she didn't feel regret, only a stillness she hadn't known in years. The house seemed quieter, but no longer lonely. She whispered toward the empty hallway, "It's done, Tom." Weeks passed before Evelyn saw Marla again. The afternoon light slanted across the living room floor when a car pulled into the driveway, its tires crunching over the gravel. Through the window, Evelyn watched her daughter step out, dressed sharply but with eyes that carried fatigue. Marla hesitated at the door before knocking, 3 quick taps that sounded more like obligation than affection. Evelyn opened it without a smile. "You can come in," she said quietly. Marla walked inside, setting her purse on the couch, scanning the room as if seeing it for the first time. "You've moved things around," she said, her tone light, but her fingers fidgeted with her sleeve. "I needed space," Evelyn replied. They sat across from each other, the coffee table between them feeling like a wall. Marla crossed her legs, her voice tightening. "I didn't mean to drop by unannounced, but I've had a rough few weeks." She let out a forced laugh. "You know how things are. Rent went up, work's been slow, and I'm just trying to keep it together." Evelyn nodded, expression unreadable. "You said that last time." Marla blinked. "Last time was different. This time it's serious. I'm behind on payments and my car needs repairs. I just need a little help until things settle." Her words came out rehearsed, polished, the kind that had worked before. Evelyn sat still, hands folded neatly in her lap. She let Marla speak until the excuses began to loop. Finally, Evelyn said, "I changed the will." The air seemed to shift. Marla's face froze, confusion flickering into disbelief. "What do you mean changed it?" "I removed you and your brother," Evelyn said simply. "Everything goes to Dean now." For a heartbeat, Marla didn't respond. Then her voice broke through sharper. "You can't do that, Mom. We're your kids." Evelyn's gaze didn't move. "You were his children, too." Marla stood up, color rising in her cheeks. "This isn't fair. Dean isn't family like we are. He's just some handyman who showed up at the right time." Evelyn didn't flinch. "He showed up, Marla. That's what mattered." Marla's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through her anger. "Dad wouldn't want this." Evelyn's reply came calm, deliberate. "Your father wanted to be remembered. You didn't even come to his funeral." Marla's breath caught. She turned toward the window, blinking hard, her jaw trembling. "I had my reasons," she whispered. "I know," Evelyn said softly. "And so did I." The room went silent again. Outside, a bird called from the fence, its sound small against the weight between them. Marla picked up her purse, movements jerky now. "If this is how you want it, fine," she said. "But don't expect us to come running when you need help someday." Evelyn stood, her voice steady. "I stopped expecting that a long time ago." Marla's eyes flickered, hurt pride, something unspoken, and then she turned and walked out. The door closed behind her, the sound echoing through the quiet house. Evelyn stood for a while, staring at the empty chair her daughter had left. The silence returned, deep and certain, but this time it didn't feel like loss. It felt like truth finally taking its place. The evening sky had turned dark by the time the second car screeched into the driveway. Evelyn heard the slam of the door, the quick, angry footsteps coming up the porch. Before she could stand, Grant burst through without knocking. His face was flushed, his eyes bright with rage. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted. "Marla just called me. You actually did it." Evelyn didn't answer. She moved to the stove, quietly filling the kettle. The whistle began low and soft, building as he continued. "You rewrote the will?" "After everything we did for this family." His voice cracked under the weight of his own fury. "You think you can erase us like that?" She took 2 cups down from the shelf, her movements slow, deliberate. "Sit if you'd like tea," she said, her tone even. "I don't want your tea," he snapped. "I want an explanation." Evelyn turned to face him. "There's nothing to explain. I made my decision." Grant stepped closer, jaw tight. "This isn't a decision, it's revenge. You're trying to punish us because we weren't perfect children." Her hands stayed steady as she poured the boiling water. "I don't punish, Grant. I just remember." He laughed bitterly. "Remember what? That we didn't drop everything to sit around crying? People grieve differently. You can't hold that against us forever." Evelyn set the teapot down. "You didn't grieve," she said quietly. "You avoided. You left me to bury your father alone." Grant's eyes flickered. That's not fair. No, she said, it's true. The silence between them grew taut. He began pacing, running a hand through his hair. You're letting that cousin manipulate you, he said. Dean's been waiting for this. He played you. She shook her head. Dean asked for nothing. He was here when your father needed help. He earned what neither of you cared to give. Grant's voice rose again, rough with anger. You're rewriting history just to make yourself feel better. You want to be the victim in everything. Evelyn looked at him steadily. I forgave many things, she said softly. Your selfishness, your distance, even the way you spoke to me after the funeral. But I won't forgive abandonment. Grant stared at her, speechless for a moment. Then his face hardened. You think this gives you power? You think crossing out our names makes you right? I don't need to be right, she said. I just need peace. He stood still, breathing hard. The sound of the clock ticking filled the room. Finally, he turned toward the door. You'll die alone, Mom, he said coldly. She didn't move. The door slammed behind him, shaking the frame. The house fell silent again. Evelyn lifted her cup, took a slow sip, and set it down carefully. Her reflection wavered in the tea's surface as she whispered to the empty room. I already did. Months drifted by in quiet rhythm. The seasons turned, and Evelyn settled into a life of slow mornings and long evenings. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only stillness. One afternoon, as she sorted through the mail, a plain white envelope caught her eye. The handwriting on the front was neat, familiar, Dean Hart. She carried it to the table, sat down, and opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter, written with the same thoughtful tone Tom's nephew had always carried. Aunt Evelyn, I wanted you to know I've done something in Uncle Tom's memory. I used part of what you gave me to start a small scholarship fund at the local elementary school, the same one he once donated supplies to. It's called the Thomas Hart Hands-On Learning Grant. The first award ceremony is next week. I'd be honored if you came. She read it twice, her eyes tracing the steady handwriting. For the first time in a long while, she smiled. The following week, she drove to the small brick school on the edge of town. The parking lot was full, parents, teachers, and children buzzing with excitement. She parked in the far corner, away from the crowd, and slipped quietly inside. The gymnasium smelled of chalk and floor polish. Banners made by students hung along the walls, each painted with bright colors and crooked letters. On the stage, a wooden plaque gleamed beneath the lights. The Thomas Hart Grant, for creativity and compassion. Dean stood at the podium, nervous but proud. Tom believed in work that came from the heart, he said to the room. He taught me that skill means little without kindness. Applause filled the space. Evelyn stayed near the back, unnoticed, her hands folded in her lap. She watched a group of children step forward, each holding small wooden projects, birdhouses, picture frames, tiny shelves, all things Tom had once loved teaching others to build. Their laughter echoed through the room, light and warm. For the first time since the funeral, the sound didn't hurt. It filled her with something softer, quiet gratitude, perhaps. She could almost imagine Tom standing beside her, smiling that shy, proud smile he always had when something good came from his effort. When the ceremony ended, Evelyn didn't approach Dean. She waited until the crowd thinned, then walked up to the plaque. Her fingers brushed over her husband's name, carved deep into the polished surface. It felt solid, permanent, more lasting than any inheritance or apology could ever be. Outside, the air was crisp and full of life. She stood for a while watching families leave, children tugging their parents toward cars, chattering about their project. It was a world still turning, still kind in small ways. Evelyn went home quietly. She didn't write to her children. She didn't need to. What had been broken didn't ache anymore. As evening light filled her living room, she whispered into the empty air, "You were remembered, Tom, just like you wanted." And for the first time in years, the silence that followed felt gentle. Evelyn's hands trembled as she held the pen, the weight of years pressing down like winter's chill. The room smelled faintly of old wood and lavender, a comforting echo of the life she and Tom had built. Her body had grown frail, her breath shallow, but her mind remained sharp, tracing the faces of Grant and Marla in memory, so eager for pleasure, so blind to the man who had loved them. The letter flowed steadily, not from anger, but from the clarity that comes when time softens grief, yet leaves truth intact. She recounted nothing of the confrontations, the rewritten will, or the bitter silence that followed. She spoke simply of Tom's heart, of lessons unlearned, of the love that had been overlooked while he still lived. Her words were neither reproachful nor pleading. They were a quiet reckoning, a final explanation of why she acted as she had, why she honored her husband's memory over the emptiness of their neglect. When she finished, she folded the paper with care and placed it in an envelope, pressing her wedding ring against the seal. It felt like a talisman, a bridge between the life she had shared and the truth she wanted to leave behind. She set it on the table beside a photograph of Tom, his grin wide and unburdened, the light from the afternoon sun bathing his face in gold. Evelyn sank back into her chair, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the quiet rhythm of the world forward. Dean, faithful and kind, would find her soon, but she would meet him in peace, her final act not of vengeance, not of bitterness, but of fidelity, to love remembered, to promises kept, and to a life concluded on her own term. The light lingered across Tom's photo, and for the first time in decades, she felt the weight of years dissolve into stillness. Do you think I did the right thing by cutting them out of my life, or should I have given them another chance? I'm curious what you think. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.